She thought the invitation would be her final victory, a chance for him to see what he'd lost, to watch her marry a man who could give her everything he never could. She imagined him showing up with his head down, maybe mumbling congratulations before quietly disappearing into the background. But when that engine roared into the driveway and every head turned, when she saw who stepped out of that car, something inside her chest went cold, because some people don't stay down, and some lessons come too late. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. This is about Emma Richardson and Daniel Carter, two people who met during their junior year of college at a state university in Ohio, both working part-time jobs to afford textbooks and hoping their degrees would open doors their parents never had access to. Emma was studying marketing, constantly networking, attending every career fair, making sure her LinkedIn profile was perfect. Daniel was in the engineering program, spending late nights in the lab, building circuit boards and writing code for projects he was convinced would change something, even if he didn't know what yet. They started dating after meeting at a mutual friend's apartment party. Nothing fancy, just cheap beer and loud music, but they talked for 3 hours straight on a balcony that overlooked a parking lot. They talked about where they came from. Small towns with one stoplight and big dreams that felt impossible from there, and where they wanted to go. Daniel told her about his plan to work in renewable energy, to build something that mattered. Emma told him she wanted to run her own marketing firm someday, to be the kind of woman people respected in boardrooms. They believed in each other. For 2 years, they were inseparable. Study sessions that turned into late-night diners, weekend road trips in his beat-up Honda, talks about moving to a bigger city together after graduation, maybe Chicago or Denver, somewhere with opportunity. Emma kept a list on her phone of baby names she liked, even though they both agreed kids were years away. Daniel had started looking at engagement rings online, nothing he could afford yet, but he was planning. He told his best friend he was going to propose after graduation, maybe on a beach somewhere, nothing extravagant but meaningful. That was the plan, but life doesn't care about plans. 3 months before graduation, Daniel's mom called him at 2 a.m. His dad had collapsed at work. Heart attack, massive, the kind that doesn't give warnings. He survived, barely, but the medical bills started piling up before he even left the ICU. Daniel's parents didn't have great insurance. His dad was a mechanic, his mum worked part-time at a grocery store. They lived paycheck to paycheck even in the good times. Now, they were drowning. Daniel dropped everything. He took a leave of absence from school. Just 1 semester, he told himself, just until things stabilized. He picked up 2 jobs, one at a warehouse loading trucks before dawn, another doing its support at a call center until midnight. He sent every dollar home. He barely slept. His apartment, the one he'd shared with 2 roommates, started to feel like just a place to shower and change clothes. He stopped going out, stopped answering texts as quickly. Emma tried to be supportive at first. She'd bring him food, sit with him during his 15-minute breaks, tell him it would get better. But as weeks turned into months and his dad's recovery dragged on, requiring more surgeries, more therapy, more bills, she started to feel the weight of it too. Her friends were graduating, starting careers, moving into nice apartments. She was still waiting for Daniel to get back on track, waiting for their life to start. She got a job offer in Columbus, entry-level, but with good potential for growth. She wanted to take it, but it would mean moving 2 hours away from Daniel. She asked him what he thought. He was exhausted, standing in his kitchen that smelled like instant ramen and old coffee, and he told her the truth. He didn't know when things would get better. He didn't know when he could go back to school. He couldn't ask her to wait. She took the job. At first, they tried long distance, weekend visits, video calls, promises that this was temporary. But the distance wasn't just physical. Emma was thriving. New wardrobe for work, happy hours with colleagues, company events where she met people who talked about stock options and vacation homes. Daniel was still working those two jobs, still sending money home, still trapped. She started to resent the phone calls, the ones where he sounded tired, where he couldn't talk long because he had a shift starting. She wanted to talk about her day, her wins, her life. But it felt wrong to celebrate when he was struggling. So she stopped calling as much. He noticed, but he didn't say anything. What could he say? He knew he couldn't give her what she needed right now. 6 months after she moved, Emma started seeing someone from her office. His name was Trevor. He was a senior account manager, drove a nice car, took her to restaurants she'd only seen on Instagram. He made her laugh. He made her feel like her life was moving forward instead of standing still. She didn't plan to fall for him. It just happened. She knew she needed to tell Daniel, but every time she tried, she couldn't find the words. So she kept putting it off. Until one Friday evening, she drove back to Daniel's town. She showed up at his apartment unannounced. He was surprised, happy to see her. He'd just gotten off his warehouse shift, and he smelled like sweat and cardboard, but he smiled when he opened the door. She didn't smile back. They sat on his couch, the same one they used to watch movies on, and she told him she'd met someone. She didn't plan it, but she couldn't keep doing this. She needed stability. She needed someone who was present, who could plan a future with her. Daniel sat there, hands folded in his lap, staring at the coffee table. He didn't cry, didn't yell. He just nodded slowly and said he understood. She left that night. He stood at the window and watched her taillights disappear down the street. His dad was still recovering. His bank account was nearly empty. The woman he loved was gone. And for the first time in months, he let himself break down. But only for that one night, because the next morning, his alarm went off at 4:45 and he had a shift to get to. So he got up and he kept going. Daniel didn't have the luxury of falling apart. His dad needed physical therapy 3 times a week. The bills kept coming, so he worked. But something had shifted inside him. The pain of losing Emma didn't make him bitter, it made him focused. He realized he'd been surviving, but not building. So he started building. During his lunch breaks at the call center, he started teaching himself advanced coding, Python, SQL, data analysis, things he'd only touched on in school. He used free online courses, YouTube tutorials, forums where people answered questions at 2 a.m. After 3 months, he built a small automation tool for the call center's scheduling system. It saved the managers hours of work every week. They noticed. They offered him a junior analyst position. It wasn't much more money, but it was 1 job instead of 2, and it was a start. He took it. He kept learning. Every night after work, he'd sit in his apartment with the lights off except for his laptop screen, building projects, writing code, applying to remote freelance gigs. He landed a few small contracts, then bigger ones. Then a company in Chicago reached out. They'd seen his GitHub portfolio, the projects he'd been building on the side, and they wanted him to consult on a logistics optimization system. He didn't have a degree yet, but he had skills, and skills were what they needed. The contract paid more than both his old jobs combined. For the first time in a year, Daniel could breathe. He sent money to his parents, but he also started saving. Not much at first, but something. He finished his degree online, one class at a time, while working full-time. It took 2 years, but he did it. And by the time he graduated, he wasn't looking for entry-level jobs anymore. He was being recruited. A logistics tech company in Denver offered him a senior analyst position. Good salary, benefits, equity options. He moved. New city, new apartment, new life. But he didn't forget where he came from. He remembered what it felt like to have nothing. So when he saw inefficiencies in the company's systems, he didn't just point them out. He fixed them. He built tools, wrote algorithms, streamlined processes that saved the company millions. Within a year, he was promoted to engineering lead. The CEO started inviting him to strategy meetings. Investors wanted to hear his ideas. He wasn't just an employee anymore. He was an asset. 2 years later, Daniel and 2 colleagues left to start their own company, a logistics platform that used AI to optimize supply chains for mid-sized businesses, the ones big enough to need help but too small for the enterprise solutions. They bootstrapped it at first, working out of a shared office space, living on savings and hope. Then they landed their first major client, then another. Then venture capital came knocking. They raised $2 million in their seed round, then $8 million in Series A. The company grew fast, 50 employees, then 100, then 200. Daniel was the CTO, the technical brain behind everything they built. And by the time he turned 30, the company was valued at over $100 million. His equity alone made him wealthier than he'd ever imagined. But he still drove a used Toyota, still lived in a modest apartment, still sent money to his parents every month, even though his dad was fully recovered now and back to work. He didn't need people to know he'd made it. He just needed to know. But life has a funny way of bringing the past back around. Emma had done well for herself. After a few years in Columbus, she moved to a bigger firm in Cleveland. She worked her way up to marketing director, led campaigns for national brands, built a reputation as someone who got results. She and Trevor got engaged after dating for 2 years. He proposed at a vineyard upstate, very Instagram-worthy. She posted photos and got hundreds of likes. Trevor was steady. He had a good job in finance, came from a family with money. He was the kind of man her parents loved. They bought a house together in a nice suburb, started planning the wedding. Emma threw herself into it. She wanted everything perfect. The venue, a historic mansion with gardens and a stone terrace. The dress, custom designed, something that would look stunning in photos. The guest list, a mix of family, college friends, and professional contacts. People who mattered. One evening, while going through old contacts to finalize invitations, she came across Daniel's name. She hadn't thought about him in a long time, hadn't checked his social media, hadn't asked mutual friends about him. As far as she knew, he was probably still working some regular job, maybe finally finished his degree, living a quiet life somewhere. She stared at his name for a long time. Part of her thought it was a bad idea. Why invite him? What was the point? But another part of her, the part she didn't want to examine too closely, wanted him to see. She wanted him to see that she'd made the right choice, that leaving him had led to this beautiful life, this successful career, this stable future. She convinced herself it was about closure, about showing there were no hard feelings. So she added him to the list. She addressed the invitation herself, sent it to the last address she had for him, hoped it would find him. She imagined him opening it in some small apartment, seeing the embossed lettering, the elegant script, the expensive cardstock. She imagined him feeling a pang of regret, maybe wishing things had been different. She didn't expect him to actually come. But if he did, she thought, it would just prove she'd won. The day arrived. Perfect weather, clear sky, warm sun filtering through the trees. The mansion looked like something out of a magazine. White chairs arranged in rows on the lawn, flowers everywhere, a string quartet playing softly. Guests arrived in waves. Emma's family, Trevor's family, college friends, work colleagues, everyone dressed to impress. Emma felt like a queen. Her dress fit perfectly, her makeup was flawless, her hair styled in loose waves that took 2 hours to get right. She moved through the crowd during the cocktail hour, accepting compliments, laughing at jokes, feeling the weight of everyone's attention. This was her day, everything she'd worked for, everything she deserved. Trevor stood beside her, proud, his arm around her waist, introducing her to relatives she hadn't met yet. She felt secure, validated, happy. But as the ceremony start time approached, she noticed a shift. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned toward the driveway. Someone gasped. Emma followed their gaze, and her heart dropped. Coming up the long driveway was a car that didn't belong. Sleek, black, impossibly expensive. A Lamborghini Huracan, its engine growling low and powerful, turning every head. It rolled to a stop near the valet station. The scissor doors lifted up, and Daniel stepped out. He looked different, not just older, but refined. His suit was tailored perfectly, charcoal grey with a subtle sheen, no tie, top button undone. His hair was cut sharp, his posture relaxed, confident. He nodded to the valet, handed over the key, and walked toward the garden like he'd been to 1,000 events like this. Emma couldn't move. Her mind went blank. This wasn't possible. This wasn't the Daniel she knew. The Daniel she left behind was struggling, drowning, broken. This man looked like he owned the world. The whispers started immediately. Guests leaning close to each other, eyes wide, voices hushed but urgent. Is that her ex? How does he know the bride? Did you see that car? Oh my God, is that a Lambo? Trevor noticed. He glanced at Emma, his expression shifting from confusion to something harder. He didn't say anything, but his jaw tightened. Emma forced herself to move. She walked toward Daniel, her smile frozen in place, her mind racing. He saw her coming and smiled. Not a smug smile, not a vindictive one, just calm, genuine, warm. He met her halfway, extended his hand, said, "Hey, Emma, congratulations, you look incredible." His voice was steady, no anger, no bitterness, just kindness. She shook his hand, her own trembling slightly, and managed to say, "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you'd make it." He shrugged lightly. "I wasn't sure either, but I figured why not? Life's too short to hold grudges." She wanted to ask him 1,000 questions. How did this happen? What have you been doing? Where did you get that car? But the words stuck in her throat. Trevor appeared at her side, his hand on her lower back, his smile polite but strained. Daniel extended his hand to Trevor, introduced him, congratulated him. Trevor shook his hand, said something polite, but his eyes were cold. Daniel didn't linger. He made small talk with a few other guests. People he remembered from college, complimented the venue, accepted a glass of champagne from a passing server. He stayed for maybe 20 minutes. Then he quietly found Emma again, thanked her for the invitation, wished her all the best, and left. No drama, no scene, just grace. But the damage was done. The rest of the ceremony, Emma couldn't focus. She heard the officiant talking, heard herself saying her vows, heard Trevor's voice, heard the applause. But her mind was somewhere else. She kept seeing Daniel's face, the way he'd looked at her with no resentment, the way he'd moved through that crowd with quiet confidence, like he didn't to prove anything to anyone. The way everyone had stared at him, not her. During the reception, people kept bringing it up. Did you see who showed up? Emma's ex came in a Lamborghini. What does he do now? Emma smiled through it, deflected questions, tried to focus on Trevor, on their first dance, on cutting the cake. But inside, she felt something crumbling. This was supposed to be her victory, her moment to prove she'd made the right choice. Instead, she felt like she'd lost something she didn't even know she'd had. Weeks turned into months. Emma settled into married life. She and Trevor went on their honeymoon, came back, resumed their routines. Work, dinners, weekends with friends. On paper, everything was perfect. But late at night, when Trevor was asleep and the house was quiet, Emma found herself thinking about Daniel. Not in a romantic way. She loved Trevor. She'd made her choice. But she couldn't stop wondering, what if she'd stayed? What if she'd believed in him when things were hard? Would she have been part of that success, or would she have dragged him down? She didn't know, and that uncertainty gnawed at her. She started looking him up online, found his company's website, read articles about their growth, saw his name mentioned in tech publications. He'd done interviews, spoken at conferences, been featured in a Forbes 30 under 30 list 2 years ago. He'd built something real, and he'd done it without her. She told herself it didn't matter. She'd built something real too, a career, a marriage, a life. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd walked away from something extraordinary because she was afraid of the struggle. And now, seeing what he'd become, she wondered if she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. Daniel, for his part, moved on. He didn't think about Emma often. When he did, it wasn't with anger or regret, just a quiet acknowledgement that she'd been part of his story, but not the ending. He dated, casually at first, then more seriously. He met someone eventually, a woman named Claire, who worked in urban planning, who understood long hours and big goals, who didn't care about his money but loved the way his mind worked. They moved in together after a year, talked about getting married someday, but weren't in a rush. Daniel had learned that the right things don't need to be forced. He still worked hard, still grew his company, still sent money to his parents. But he also learned to enjoy the life he'd built. He traveled, took up photography, spent weekends hiking in the Rockies. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. He'd already proven it to himself, and that was enough. So here's what I want to know. If you were Emma, how would you feel watching your ex show up like that? Would you feel proud of the life you built? Or would you wonder what you gave up? Would it make you question your choices? Or would you stand firm in believing you did what was right for you? And if you were Daniel, would you have gone to that wedding? Would you have wanted to show up and let her see what she missed? Or would you have let the past stay buried? Because here's the truth. This story isn't about revenge. It's not even about who won or lost. Emma didn't make a wrong choice. She made a human choice. She chose stability over uncertainty, security over struggle. And there's nothing wrong with that. She built a good life. But Daniel made a different choice. He chose to believe in himself when no one else did. He chose to turn his pain into fuel, and he built something extraordinary. Neither of them were wrong, but only one of them spent years wondering what if. And that's the real cost of walking away from someone during their hardest moment. Not that they might succeed without you, but that you'll never know if you could have been part of something greater, if you just held on a little longer. Think about the people in your life right now. The ones who are struggling, the ones who are grinding through hard seasons, who don't look like much on paper, but have something burning inside them. Are you standing beside them, or are you waiting to see if they make it first? Because the people who believe in you when you have nothing, those are the ones who deserve to be there when you have everything. Emma learned that lesson too late. Daniel learned it right on time. So tell me, what would you have done? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this story made you feel something, if it made you think about your own choices, hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just becoming the person you were meant to be, with or without the people who didn't believe in you. And that's a victory no one can take away.